afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock. It's time for me to open this afternoon session for the final two matters 7 and 8. Looking around the room, not new faces. So I'll just run through a few housekeeping procedural points. So the Central and Eastern Berkshire Joint Minerals and Waste Plan has been prepared by 4 constituent authorities, which we refer to the authorities. And the plan we refer to simply as the plan throughout these sessions. And my name is Rachel Lust. I am a Chartered Town Planner, and alongside me today is Ms. Palmer, who is also a Chartered Town Planner. And we have been appointed by the Secretary of State for Housing Reviews and Local Government under Section 20 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act to hold this examination into the soundness of this plan and produce a report of our findings, our conclusions and recommendations with regards to soundness. So before we begin, can everyone hear me still through the microphones? So most people will have met Stephanie Street, our programme officer, who is still with us in the room at the far side. She works under our direction. She's not been involved in the plan preparation process, either indirectly or directly, so she's responsible for all of the administrative arrangements, and outside of the hearing sessions, any contact you make with us, she can do Stephanie. We are going to continue using the microphones to be effective. I think some of the interference comes from when mobile phone gets near them. So when they crackle, so if you've got your mobile phones nearby, I think that might be the reason it's cracking. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm does sound, it will not be a drill, and the assembly point is outside the town hall, at the front by the fountain. And if you've not already found the toilets, they are across the hallway, outside the council chamber. We have camera on the wall in the corner over there, so the hearing sessions will be recorded, and they will be published together as a batch, hopefully next week, or when those individuals who are working on that side of the technology have put them together so people can review the footage as they please. Is anyone else present who intends to film or record the proceedings in addition to film and record? So our role as inspectors is to assess whether the plan satisfies the requirements of the 2004 Act, its relevant regulations, and whether it's sound. In order to be sound, the National Planning Policy Framework states the plan should be positively prepared, justified, effective and consistent with national policy. And the series of hearings are intended to assist us in that regard. In submitting the plan, the authorities consider that it is sound, and that's the starting point for the examination process. So where people are challenging the soundness of the plan, then there's a need to explain to us why it's unsound and what changes would therefore make it sound. We are taking one or two notes as an aid memoir through the sessions, which will help us prepare the report, but there's no transcript of proceedings. In terms of changes to the plan, as I said, the authorities have submitted a plan that they consider is sound, but once a plan has been submitted, there are only 2 ways that changes can be made. Either main modifications, or MMs, and these are recommended by the inspectors, or additional modifications, which are AMs, and they're made by the authorities on adoption. So for us to recommend MMs, if required to make the plan sound, the authorities would formally invite us to do so. And we can only recommend main modifications if they're necessary to resolve problems that would otherwise make the plan unsound. So the main modifications, by way of definition, are changes that would materially alter the plan or its policies. And in the interest of fairness, there will be a consultation following the hearing sessions, and further sustainability approaches are also needed. At that time, the policies map will be included with the consultation, but as it's not a statutory development plan, we don't have the power to recommend modifications to it directly. But in the event that any modifications to the plan require consequential amendments to the policies map, then these are published alongside for completeness. The additional modifications do not fall within the scope of the examination, as it's the authorities which are accountable for them. They typically involve factual updates, corrections, typographical errors. There are occasions where we have to put on the additional modifications, and the authorities will also bring to our attention as we go through discussions. But at this stage, the authorities' proposed modifications are just that, proposed. So our role is assessing whether the submitted plan is sound, and we've been discussing and will continue to discuss the proposed changes as we go along through the hearing sessions. So this afternoon's session is programmed to finish no later than 5 p.m. We will take a mid-afternoon break if we're still sitting around 2:30 or similar convenient point. I shall be leading matters 7 and 8 that we have for this afternoon. So there is an outline agenda. Has everybody got sight of the agenda for both matters? Have we got the agenda? And are some available at the back, Stephanie? Yes. Right. So the hearing sessions themselves are a structured discussion, so one which will lead based on matters, issues and questions, which is available on the examination website. And in order to test the plan for soundness and legal compliance, we will continue to answer some questions throughout the session. We've already been doing this through preliminary matters in April, the letters to the authorities on those, and also through matters, issues and questions published last month. The matters, issues and questions was a detailed document, so it may be the case for some matters from written representations, the hearing position statements, we now have enough information, so there may be little or no discussion on these. So we'd also like to remind participants you should provide all of your evidence in your original representations, and the hearings are not an opportunity to submit anything further, and any comments that you make during the hearing session should therefore relate to the points that you made in the original representation or hearing statements. If you wish to highlight certain parts of your statement or other documents that form part of the examination, it would be really helpful to us if everyone present could give document reference number, page or paragraph number. The series of hearing sessions form part of the overall examination process, and as such, the examination itself remains open until our report is submitted to the authorities. But no further representations or evidence are accepted after the hearing sessions are closed unless we particularly requested. As part of this week, we have seen a number of the sites from public vantage points. We may choose to visit some sites again after the hearing sessions, and if any access arrangements are required, we will make this through Stephanie. Is there any questions at this point? So, matter 7 is development management. Could I ask the participants for this particular matter to introduce themselves, please? I'm going to turn to the authorities first, please.
Thank you. This is Brooks, Planning Policy Manager at Hampshire Services. For this particular matter, we've got a number of offices that will change places if that's okay throughout.
That's fine, thank you.
Gary King, Project Manager Policy.
So just when the authorities are swapping seats, if you could just introduce yourself when you step into the seat and say which matters that you're going to be, which policies you're going to be talking about, that would be really helpful to me. And turning to the
Chair, to come back to Regent Park, just to point out that I think you're aware we haven't made specific representations on development management policy, so we'll be principally observing that there may be some interaction with the objectives that we've made and comments on the allocation policies and particularly restoration and mitigation.
Thank you. Right, so my approach for this particular matter is I have the agenda which lists the particular policies that I want to pick up. A few points on. So I'll also be using the matters, issues and questions. start with policy DM3. So DM3 is the protection of habitats and species. It's a detailed policy. My question to the authorities on this one is, given that the biodiversity metric is evolving and we have the environment bill going through its stages, how can we build some flexibility into this policy to make sure it can take account of what emerges from the environment bill and then into the Act?
It's currently drafted at the moment to take into account that in part 1 of the policy, making reference to biodiversity again. We have added some additional supporting text to the policy, which makes reference to guidance that may well come out. And we make reference specifically in supporting text to the biodiversity metric. So the hook we've done is in part 1 of the policy to make reference to it. But as you say, it is an evolving matter, and even the guidance is coming out, we'll learn more on it, which is why, in addition to updating the existing text already in AM2 and AM4, with our proposed modifications, making reference to the biodiversity metric or proposed metric, we've obviously added in reference to relevant guidance, knowing that some is being prepared currently for the industry, so it's really useful. We've also added in proposed modification AM3, which I'm probably sure is verging on a main modification as well. As colleagues are sort of learning more and want to try and work out how best to implement that, particularly I think with the community industry. But it's that evolving process which has meant that, so following your question on that, we wanted to add further clarification. So, in short answer, sorry, part 1 is meant to be the hook, but we have proposed additional proposed modifications to assist with that.
Thank you, that's helpful. I'm just looking at AM3, and it is on my list of how would this look in context? Would it be more appropriate for a main modification? I'm looking towards the end of the wording where you're talking about it's strongly recommended. It's strongly recommended the word habitat loss, etc.
In rereading that and understanding a bit more in the context of previous comments, I can see that the emphasis there is quite a strong recommendation. And so, on reflection, I think there's some key points in there that would warrant going into the main policy. So I would appreciate the time to work that into a revised main modification on DM3 at this point.
That's really helpful. So I'll leave that one with you on your list of ones to look at and consider a little further.
I just also ask, in AM3, first part of the modification asks for like-for-like habitats at a greater area, at least 1.5 times greater. What was the basis for 1.5 times greater?
That's come from my ecology colleagues as their current thinking on this. I don't have information to hand on their basis on that, but I can get that to you if you'd like some more. That's come from a colleague, but I don't know sure what her basis on that was. It's her current practice. Do you know?
I think the basis of that is if habitat is being removed for development, and like for like is created, it's the lag time in that habitat becoming developed. And if there is a lag time involved, that's a net loss of biodiversity. So you have to come in with a greater than was taken out in the first place. That's the thinking behind that. I think it's a fairly standard approach.
Yes, it was that run over buffer,
Yes.
isn't it, to allow more.
It compensates for the loss and development time,
Yeah.
10 to 20 years.
Right, that was DN3. And then we want to DN4, which is protection of designated landscape. And in this one, we have a main modification put forward consideration. I think we said previously, where there are updates to do with the NVPF, they won't be able to be done in a complete catch-all main modification. So any main modifications that relate to the NVPF need to be specified separately. So the main modification 3 is about the setting of the area outstanding natural beauty. As I understand it, that's to specifically address priority 172 of the NPPF that's now 176 of the NPPF.
That's correct.
Yes. Moving down to the next one, DM5, protection of the countryside. We have main modification 4 in this one, which includes a few extra bits of work. Could you just explain to me the origins of this one and how you've come up with the extra criteria and the adjustments in this one? Thank you.
The issue on time limited was raised as one of the representations. And it made the point that obviously mineral extraction in its nature is a time limited operation anyway, so it didn't make sense to have time limited in front of the mineral extraction wording. Hence the fact that the wording was moved to time limited related development. We also noted, following the logic of questioning, realised that whilst we talked about how some waste uses do require a countryside location, we have that in the sporting text above the instruction policy in paragraph 5.42. That hadn't actually been reflected in the policy itself, and it's actually quite a key point. And we obviously discussed that this morning about some waste activities do require a countryside location. So following that logic through, we have the principle there that it really needed to be reflected in the policy itself. And the other process was more of a sort of formatting process, which we felt sort of had a better flow of the wording policy. So structure.
So the bottom of that modification, you've got criteria D, is subject to the requirement that it's restored. From my notes, requirement, what's the mechanism that will be behind that to give the certainty to the users of the plan that there's a requirement?
In terms of something to read that back through.
Yeah, so criteria D.
So in fact, it's no longer required for its use that it would be restored. If it's not used for it, it's no longer required for it, it's always use. We go back to
So the mechanism for that would be
usually restoration schemes, and
yes.
one of those, whatever it is.
turning to the next one on the list. DM6. So DM6 is the green belt one. I think this one just needs a little bit more thought. I think it's largely criterion one, we've got proposals for mineral and waste development. So we've got two types of development in the green belt, and national green belt policies, obviously, minerals workings, mineral sites are not inappropriate development. And I think there needs to be, to make this clear and effective, I think there needs some adjustment of the wording in there to just make that clear. Because minerals are not inappropriate, and the way the policy is set out, if it's not inappropriate development, you don't go into very special circumstances. And I think at the moment, it's not as effective as it needs to be. Have you got any thoughts on this, Rose?
No, I'm very happy to review that, and I think making the point that they're two different processes that do have different impacts on the green belt. I think it's meant to be a sort of catch-all, keep it simple, but I can see your logic in the fact that by doing that, it probably makes it more difficult to read through and apply. And so we would be happy to revisit that wording and split out two processes. That'd be nice.
I think that would be a really good step forward. I think M5, which does pick up another point that the proposal is not inappropriate development, goes some way to dealing with that, but I think it's just not quite there. So I think that would be a logical way forward.
I'm just clearing in part two of the policy. The first requirement, the proposal is not inappropriate development. And then it's got or, the three little bullet points. And it reads as though the other ones are alternatives to the not inappropriate development.
Instead of as well as
Falls. Because you have to consider whether it's an appropriate development. You have to do all proposals for that. And then these other points, it just strikes me that there may be additional points to consider.
I think you're probably right, because that's the first initial point, the first part two, and then the other following it is the secondary. So yes, I think it's probably and then all on each bullet. Or separating out two differences.
I think it might be easy to separate, when you separate it out, and when you reflect on how to separate the policy to deal with minerals and waste. I think that will possibly make it clearer too when you're thinking that one through. So we're happy to leave that one in to reflect on.
I think that's important.
Right, I'll move on to DM7, which is concerning the historic environment. And we've got an additional modification in this one. I think my question on matters, issues and questions, 7.15, regarding should the policy include the requirement to record all assets to be lost and the recording to be deposited in the public archive to be consistent with national policy. The next I've got here, I've made myself a discussion, is a question of would you not want to give this strength in policy?
We previously had it setting a context, but equally it is kind of general thrust of the whole approach, so I don't think there's any harm if it is greater clarity and strength by moving it into the introduction of the policy. I also noted from the comments we've had from Berkshire about in terms of the word listed, which obviously is in our proposed modifications. We're looking to obviously revise that, and in our in AM11, we would just look to strike out the word listed, so it would be locally recognised, which is the word that's suggested as a heritage asset. So we would agree that we don't want to be restricting those to only those that are listed.
Thank you. I think also looking towards criterion 4 in there, on public benefits. As you appreciate, the National Planning Policy Framework has 2 policy tests with heritage assets, doesn't it? So the public benefits are where you put the designated heritage assets. Where they're non-designated heritage assets, you don't need that public benefits test. It is just a normal planning balance to weigh things in harm. The way it's written, criterion 4 at the moment, seems to suggest you want to put the public benefits test onto all historic assets. So I'm a little bit concerned about consistency with the National Planning Policy Framework in that respect.
Okay. I'm very happy to have that reviewed on that basis.
On AM12, the basic text is the supporting text to the M7 and it's saying that archaeological recording should be secured to mitigate loss through screening, restoration, or archaeological recording. Is that a strengthening of the policy? Sort of say that's a similar point to the other policy we've made about this changing the policy should be an AM.
So AM12, so that's edit to the opening paragraph 5.61. Is that what you're talking about? You're right, it's setting a direction for something that's being required in terms of something being secured in advance. So you're right, there's a more greater emphasis at what we're looking at, seeking as part of that. So I'm happy for that to be reviewed in terms of making sure that's security policy as well.
There are some other areas actually, which is going back to policies that we've already discussed. If we go back to AM7, and that relates to policy AM6, and that relates to policy DM4. Instead of the paragraph. It's talking about landscape character assessments can be used to assess the impact of development inside and outside of designated areas. Is that adding to the policy in any way?
That's meant to be a sort of additional guidance of how we would judge the landscape. So that's why we're suggesting it as meant to be new supporting the text. It's only the implementation of it, so it's just additional guidance on how you can judge that.
Yes, then on that particular one, it is just an additional signpost, isn't it? Because the policy itself talks about development proposals will need to be accompanied by a landscape and visual impact assessment. That's the particular document that you'll need, but landscape character assessments also background evidence can be used to inform those. So that's on the national character register, so that's fine.
We've got AM7, and that relates to policy EM5. It changes the text to refer to the intrinsic character and beauty of landscapes. To reflect paragraph 174 of the framework. Is that yeah. Is that the main modification? Or is it just an update to reflect the framework?
Yeah, it was simply just an update to reflect the changed wording in the updated APPF.
Okay. And then going on to AM8. It says that the intrinsic character and beauty of the landscape will be determined by the relevant local character assessment. So is that adding anything to the policy? It's adding extra requirements to it.
It's more general guidance of how to steer and determining it, rather than being so it's meant to be more of a guide. But it's quite a fixed requirement in terms of the future. So we can add that into the policy if it's a particular requirement and that's how it was determined. We put it as an implementation of how we go about that, but I can see the timeline there in terms of what we would require and what we would, and how we would stick.
Right, I'm just going to move on to DM8, which is the restoration of minerals and waste development. So if everybody can just keep an eye on the AMs and the MMs across the development process. That's what we're trying to cross-check at the moment, so we're covering what we need to. So DM8 is about restoration of minerals and waste development, and this I think you put forward NN6. M6 is the flood risk management, and with that cross-reference as to what we were talking about flood risk earlier in the week, doesn't it?
That's correct, yes. So we absolutely agree that that's what we should be used to.
Yes.
We're in yes, AM 14, adds a new paragraph. There's quite a lot of detail in there. That goes past also policy.
I think it's more clarity, adding clarity rather than through changing policy.
So in policy DM8, which was about the restoration, just looking for the word aftercare, and this is a lot of detail, but a new paragraph 5.78. Just point me to the word aftercare. I see.
I think the opening element of the new paragraph, which says must be accompanied by restoration activity, needs to go into the policy where we use it as a requirement. I think then preceding bullet points, we go into the implementation text to so then the policy, the detail of what those would then need to include as a guide to the implementation. But the hook in the policy itself.
Yes, I think a cross-reference would make that effective in terms of restoration and aftercare schemes. They know, people who put those together, they know precisely what we seek in them. So I think the bullet points are fine. If we just reference those back into the policy, that would improve the effectiveness of policies. So we're just looking at AM 16 in terms of the second insertion there about the authorities must, which has been changed from must from should.
We have got in part 2 of the policy, the restoration of renewables and enhance and contribute to, where there's inconsistent with relevant national policies and guidance. So obviously that's making reference to studies of restoration strategies and guidance comes out. So is that sufficiently covered by last part of the element?
I think what we're looking at is that the restorations and restoration strategy and guidance must be read in accordance with this policy in reference where appropriate. So, how would users of the plan ensure you as a minimum planning authority that they follow those?
Yeah, okay.
So going from a should to a must is a stronger requirement. Should implies you would hopefully do it, and it would be a good idea if you do, but a must is a much more definitive statement, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll be happy to keep it as
Should, right?
rather than must. I think there's sufficient scope within part 2 of the policy to highlight the references, policies that I and keep the implementation.
And moving on to DM9, which is about protecting health, safety and immunity. We've got some additional text that we're proposing here, some additional modification, and this possibly arises from Raisbury Parish Council's representation, maybe it's the inspiration for this, but I think it also goes to some of the things that we were talking about this morning, in terms of making sure development is in conformity with planning permissions, and any mineral or waste development not being operated in accordance with their permissions. Each relevant authority will take the necessary steps. I'm just wondering whether that is sufficient in terms of the context of the debate that was going on this morning, about certainty of authorities fully investigating whether enforcement action is expedient and important.
This wording is has been added in, but we had the original hook in the beginning of in standard DM1. I think we also touched on the fact that plan will be enforced, and so this was an additional detail. I think it's under DM1. Add in making reference to their modifications we added in terms of making reference to their enforcement policy. It's quite difficult to know how far to take that, so we have to reference it. We have to assume that the development management policies are going to be undertaken as they should be, and that's all other regimes are. So other than kind of outlining that they will be undertaken and making reference to those policies, it's really difficult to know how far the plan can take that, other than setting out as many elements that we recognise for each individual site that come forward that needs to be addressed. It's a tricky one.
Right, moving down to DM10, which is flood risk.
That explains very much.
You can do it, let's do it. Right, DM10, and we've got a main modification number 7 put forward there. We mentioned this one earlier, haven't we, in previous sessions, and that's to correct the wording and also take into account climate change, isn't it? Now, one of the other representations from your property ventures wanted reference to the water compatible development, if you recall from your representations.
Sorry, yes, thank you. There, permit planning that you mentioned to water activity, something like water section. We have put that up in paragraph 5.98, sorry, there is more information in EPGs and compatibility and tables and everything. We haven't repeated that here. The key point is there is specifically for sand and gravel issues and compatibility and having a specific reference to that in paragraph.
AM19 is made for effectiveness, and so therefore it would be no modification.
Register restoration phases, AM19.
In AM20, and that deletes some wording, deletes landfill and hazardous waste facilities will not be permitted in flood risk zones 3A and 3B. And that is a clear change, and so within the land should be a land application. And then we have AM relating to 42 and 10, and that's AM21. And that has some extra text in there to refer to tables 1 to 3 in planning practice guidance. What was your views on the, whether that's changed?
It was meant to give additional guidance rather than fundamentally changing it, just to signpost, really.
So moving on to DM11, the water one, we've got a couple of main modifications for that. I've got now is 8 and 13. So in terms of main modification 8, there's reference to the additional criteria about nearby private licence abstractions. I think this was picked up by the environment agency earlier, wasn't it, in the session, so I can go forward to main modification. And the other one is 13, which is on a similar theme, isn't it? So I think that needs to be a main modification as well. Right, that leads us on to DM15. So first of all, with policy DM15, we've had a few references to it in previous sessions and this morning as well. So plant operator performance. I think for a starting point, it would be helpful to us if you could just explain a little bit more about the context of where this has come from. We've heard snippets this morning, so we've got an essence of where this policy might come from. But just to set the context, we really do need to explore this one in terms of whether it is so or not. Thank you.
Okay, so looking at the various objections that were raised to the plan, most of the time when people raise objections on site, they relate to assessments that have been done. So we can either correct the assessment or we can say the assessment has been done, and we stand by it. However, one point that was raised with us, we couldn't really address, which was to say people were upset about things that had happened before and were saying, how would you take this account in the future? And we couldn't find really a policy way of doing that, an existing policy way. So we looked around for examples, and we've highlighted some in our statement, the hearing statement. And one such example was a national policy where whether planning permission has been taken up at the housing site, kind of something that has happened in the past or didn't happen in the past, could be taken into account. And there's also a policy line in the Hampshire zoning plan that says where a site has been operating, any further applications may take into account that past performance. And the idea was that currently you look at an application under its own merit, but you look at it a bit like a blank slate. but we know that sometimes isn't the case. And because planning is meant to be evidence-based, we're wondering how can we make sure that this evidence that may exist about what has happened in the past can be taken into account at the planning application level. So the starting point was, okay, there's been a problem with the land use. However, many applications are new and on a new site. And we were also concerned that if we tied it to a previous land use, we would get the legitimate question, well, it might have changed hands. Maybe a new operator will operate differently and there will not be any problems. So that's why we then took a slightly different approach and when we offered you past performance, so that we would only hold the same people account for their own actions and not kind of transfer. So this would allow then the planning authority to look at how that operator has effectuated past planning permission. Obviously, ones that are relevant to the current proposed land use would be more relevant. And obviously, the key thing would be not just what issues have come up, but how they were resolved. And the idea was that if there's anything in that past history that would indicate that what is being proposed may not happen exactly how it's being proposed. So can we have full confidence in the mitigation measures that are proposed, that there truly won't be unacceptable impacts, etc. So it was just a way of allowing us to look at this past evidence that exists, but otherwise it's very difficult to bring into a application.
That's helpful context, thank you. I think our difficulty with this is whether it would be prejudicial for new operators coming into the area. And I accept that there have been difficulties with the sites across the area previously, but it feels as if this policy is trying to come tidy up those aspects. It wouldn't actually help deal with any problems that may arise from working sites currently. It's just about testing new sites, isn't it? It's looking forwards.
Okay. First of all, it would apply to any planning application. So if there was a planning application for an extension, an intensification of use, change of use, so because it would apply to anything like that, any proposals that would come in then could look at, well, how have things been run up till now? If it's the same operator, obviously if it's not, then we can't really judge them for what's happening on that side. We don't think it would be prejudicial to know operators because if they have no planning history, well, there's nothing to take into account. So the policy wouldn't really apply. It's only where the policy can provide further evidence. Or alternatively, if their past performance exists but is in a completely different environment, etc., I think a planning kind of judgment will have to be made how relevant that past performance is to the specific proposed land use in question.
I think in your statement, in your hearing position statement, Article 15, the first paragraph, you've made reference to the fact that planning history and past behaviour briefly mentioned in the National Planning Practice Guidance. I mean that bit in the PPG talks about the history of the site, so it's not an individual operator. And that's where our difficulty sort of arises. It's something that's land use and land use based, but past operator performance, this is about the people, the businesses operating, isn't it? Rather than whether a use on that site is accepted, it's how they behave. That's that's where you're trying to get to, I think, what you said.
Yes, I mean, there would be a potential difficulty if say, a particular operator who had no previous record and was granted planning permission, then they could sell it to someone else, couldn't they? There'd be nothing to stop that happening.
Right, so addressing the 2 points. One, in terms of the PPG, so the PPG basically refers to MPPF 77, paragraph 77, and it says, for major developments involving the provision of housing, local planning authorities should also assess why earlier planning permission for similar developments on the same site did not start. And while it is on the same site, what it's asking here may well be influenced by things that aren't related to land use. So it might not have started because they ran out of money or because they're kind of sitting on the permission. So these are all to do with what they've chosen to do with their behavior and how they perform, and nothing with specific land use. There may be nothing wrong with the land use per se, but their actions may still be taken into account, even though they're not related to the land use. So that was our thinking why that was relevant. In terms of operators without a planning history, I don't think there is an easy way around that, and the policy is phrased in a way that it wouldn't disadvantage people. So if there isn't a history, we can't take that really against them, and then they choose to sell it to another operator. Again, there's little we can do to control that. But I think because then the situation would be no different now, when now we aren't taking that history into account at all. Therefore, if we give ourselves the opportunity under certain circumstances to take that history into account, that's merely an improvement of the situation.
The sites are, or the operators are controlled under permitting legislation separately. So there is control elsewhere outside the planning system for operator performance.
I can understand that, but the permitting and planning regimes are separate. And the conditions that planning imposes, for example, traffic movement, lighting, times of operations, etc., are not covered under other regimes. So if there's been issues like that we may need to think this operator doesn't manage this very well, if they don't manage, say, landscaping and keeping kind of an area out of sight very well, if their planting hasn't worked in the past, etc. None of this would fall under the other regimes, but might be relevant for planning applications where maybe we want to impose maybe a more detailed planning conditions, or maybe ask for more information and say, okay, well, you've had problems with planting in the past, how will you kind of make sure they don't happen again? Do we need to put some bonds in place? I think in order to explore those extra burdens, which would be unfair if we don't have this evidence, this policy is going to enable us to bring that evidence to the table in order for our demands to be fair and reasonable.
Thank you. Some of those things that you mentioned, landscaping, lighting, etc. I'm just wondering how significant is it? Is it an issue of accumulation of all those aspects that would lead you to feel that that operator is not operating the site effectively? you know, would the normal breach of condition enforcement processes not pick all of these things up when sites are working anyway?
I think that's a fair question, and perhaps if that regime was perfect, we wouldn't be in a position of having this situation. And obviously, we have to assume that regime will work. But it is a very retrospective regime. It looks back after problem has arisen, and we're trying to prevent problems. We also know that local authorities are hesitant to kind of use the full power of enforcement. It's always about enabling a site to happen. And for example, after planting hasn't worked, you don't usually say to somebody, okay, stop the entire site, and 10 years later you can continue when your trees have grown. You kind of go, well, okay, you can continue working, but, you know, we'll see what we can do, etc. So some compromises have to be made that perhaps could have been avoided if they could have been foreseen based on past performance.
Okay, Mr. Francis.
Yes, I just wondered if there's a relationship between this and what's being discussed this morning about the enforcement issues and uses establishing themselves, not necessarily through the planning process properly, but you know, by the council accepting it and using it. When I looked at this, it was something that if it brought greater control was great, but I share the concern about it's about individuals and people, and to turn it onto the, I just wonder if there's a way of turning this around to deal with the planning history of sites, and because, you know, where uses have and land planning, things that come under planning control, have established themselves, whether formally or informally, and you end up with a status quo that frankly you would never have wanted to permit in the first place. Is there a way of taking that into account in how things move forward in future? So you're considering, you know, what in a sense has happened in planning history, but not the individuals.
Thank you for that. I think our principal concern was about the operator, and it's tying it to a particular company, and to bring it back to the land use. I think Mr. Angela has very helpful points to add to this debate, and so looking towards the authorities, you know, how can we put this policy and recast it into a more family history kind of perspective that would meet the aims that you're trying to achieve, because we fully understand that there are issues across the plan area, and there have been some sensitive sites, and you're looking to try and be proactive and ensure you've got some positivity going forwards. It might be something that you need to reflect on. I think we can probably only get so far on this particular policy today, but we've sort of outlined our concerns in relation to that. Mr. Angela has joined in as well. I'm wondering whether that could be taken away and you could reflect on it.
Yes, we could. If we were to limit the policy to a past site history, would there be an issue if the authority changed, or could we justify it by saying, well, the land use has been shown to be difficult, therefore even if a different operator came in, that is something we should consider or not?
I think what it would do would at least give you the evidence of history on the site, though, wouldn't it? So even though the operator changed, actually somebody who's promoting the site would then, in the context of if it was a bad site previously, then be making a lot of steps to try and prove to you that they would be able to put mitigation in place, they would operate the site correctly, they would design it correctly.
Okay, in that case, yes, we'd like the opportunity to rephrase the policy as site related.
I think that would be helpful. If we could bring that one back at the 12th of October, that's the list, whoever's keeping the list, that would go some way to address our concerns on sound that particular policy.
We've got AM23, which relates to policy M15, it's the threshold for policy review, and that may need to be revisited as well. But we can consider whether that can enable decision.
Okay, I have nothing further on the rest of the management policies. Is there anything that we've not covered? I've ticked off quite a lot of the main modifications and the additional modifications.
Following also the receiving Berkshire Garden Trust's hearing statement and reviewing that, we are proposing some additional modifications. They are to try and, in the point of the fact that there is a bit of over-emphasis on the archaeology side of things. On reflection, you can see how it could be word to interpret that. So there was, it is additional wording, but only just to sort of even out the differences to more heritage aspects as well as archaeology. And this was so that we can propose some additional modifications on their side. So listening to the concept.
Thank you. So those additional ones, those additional main modifications are not currently within this document, but they will appear in the combined document of all of these possible amendments.
That's correct.
Thank you. It's 13 minutes past 3, so I think it's a convenient time for a break, and then we'll finish off with main matter 8, which is a limited session for that one. So we'll take a break for just 15 minutes, so 3:30. Come back, those who want to come back to 3:30, and those that don't, thank you for your participation.
Is it? It's a killer, and it's 3 days. Yeah. So, check the system. Yeah, there's the, so just across the road, there's a library. No, that's it. It's raining, it's not raining. Yes, no, just some of you are back. So I'm going to the kettle.
Yeah.
I probably go sort of unusual numbers, yeah, but it's sort of a bit of a break, isn't it?
Well, you can become a bit addicted to drink tea.
Tea or coffee, mostly tea.
Yeah. We should get some system and praying for a
Yeah, I think so.
nice cup of tea.
A nice cup of tea, a little bit of caffeine, yeah. Did I sort of team at work here? I said, do you not have like a coffee shop or catering?
It has some Winchester work. Well, I was sat on the ground. Started my plumbing career, well, on a program that I put together for the early 70s. Yeah. I lived in Chelmsford. You been there long?
Actually, yes. About a few months, just for the lockdown.
I used to look for Southampton sometime back in the list of having very close friend, which she works in the planning team at Winchester, and she left us around 4 years ago. The listener as well. You are. What are they doing there? All the office accommodation. Right. They're not being rationalised.
Yes, I think they are, because they moved teams in different buildings into the building that I'm in. They're already running this.
Yeah.
So I think, yes, they're going to be set up.
Yeah. Testing.
Yeah, it's good though, so
Yeah.
it's sort of like more like a week to go.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it before, but now I'm done, so.
Yeah. Well, generally working from home in the office and making better use of the floor space and so confident it may be for some people who go to the hot desking from permanent feature.
I think this opportunity is something that I really that they can be able to
Yeah, it's got to be responsive to individual circumstances like that.
children, so it's really,
Yeah.
there's always something. It's only half an hour, but if you're interested, that's a really
Yeah.
long time. So yeah, just to
Are you ready for us then? Over to the rest of the on the wrong system. Yeah.
busy.
Yeah. Same everywhere.
Yeah. You still in chance?
No, actually, I think from here on the train to open in Oxford, near Oxford. So, yeah. But worked in before that. Is that mentioned before that? Yeah. So sport football club down there. Yeah.
Not my favourite,
Yeah.
but get involved in the doing whatever it is.
Yeah. What's enough?
Yeah. Yeah, we don't even remember what it's.
Yeah.
think Ashley's here.
Okay, everyone, it's 3:30. Let's turn to main matter 8, please. So main matter 8, it's an even more brief agenda, monitoring and review. I'd just like to understand a little bit more from the authorities, if you could just talk me through the overall monitoring strategy and how you will monitor the plans and what's the end and the monitor the plan in overall terms. We have picked up on monitoring periodically throughout sessions, so I am mindful that we have ticked off some of the additional modifications and the main modifications so far, so we don't need to run through those again. But just in overall terms, the strategy for monitoring the plan and its policies, just outline that. Whichever, Ms. Briggs, can you step or
Right, so the monitoring indicators were chosen firstly to accord with the policies, but also thinking about what could actually be measured. Because often that's the problem in monitoring these policies. You choose something, but then there's no way to kind of articulate it. But the idea is that in addition to what is measured, we give a threshold for policy review. Now, National Policy Guidance already sets out that every 5 years there will be a review of the plan. So as part of that review of the plan, we envisage that as things have been monitored kind of year on year, there will be kind of 5 years of data to look at, and that's why some of the policies just have a flat kind of more than zero requirement, but some have over several years kind of being what trend lines things are taking. So the idea is at that point, when you're reviewing the plan, you can check whether each of the policies has met its threshold, and then you can review individual policies based on that, whether they met the threshold or not. And that should help guide your conclusion as to whether the plan requires an update or not.
Thank you. So as part of putting together the package of monitoring thresholds, have you introduced any new ones from previous plans that I'm aware of? I appreciate the country have been doing this plan on behalf of the Port Authorities, but in comparison to previous plans and policies, have you taken a different approach? But is it more monitoring this time?
We took quite a fresh approach to this, and the old plans are very out of date. So we looked at what information is available now, what could be achieved and monitored effectively as well. So there wasn't much looking backwards, if I'm honest, it was more of a fresh approach.
That's very helpful. I haven't got any further questions on monitoring and review. I've got a couple of little bits in writing, but I don't need to question these any further in that respect. So just leaving to say thank you for everyone's participation this week. Ms. Briggs.
I'm very sorry. Yesterday, towards the end of the session, you asked me about a additional modification, which threw me a bit because I was looking at it out of context. But it was AN 31, which was to do with safeguarding, and I think it's really on Pond Island. When I looked at it, I lost my place, apologies. And we proposed some changes, which again are a reflection from the discussion we've had in the last couple of days. I suggested a modification, not an additional modification. But we had looked at the AN 31. We've made a change in terms of wanting to measure the hectare of safeguarding resource, not sterilise. And that was a threshold for that, because we're looking at the negative. I think it was when I was reading it out of context. we would be looking for, we were looking for a year review increase, steroids, but equally to counter that, we wanted to monitor prior extraction, ensure that it came out of prior extraction as well. So obviously, again, looking in the negative, which is why it says no increase over 5 years. Point, we've got to review the plan. We can see no increase in prior extraction, and again, that really points to something not correct with our prior extraction. So I just wanted to flag up that we are keen to see those changes come forward. So would be a main modification, because they're quite significant changes in monitoring, I presume, and we will be putting this forward.
Thank you for that. Yes, they would be a significant change, and an important one for the monitoring. And when I first looked at some of these things, they don't make sense, but when you sit and reflect on it, but that's fine, thank you. So on that note, just like to say thank you to the authorities and everyone on this side of the table for being proactive and responsive to all the questions. And we've had some participants who've come along and come up with their views as well. So the next session on the programme, so I'm not closing the hearings today, we'll close on the 12th of October. That is a virtual session. I do intend to do some joining instructions of how to technically join those. It will probably be Microsoft Teams, unless someone tells me otherwise. So that session will be focusing more on procedural and sort of administrative steps, or the next steps to get this plan moving forward. But it's still a public session, it's still part of the hearing, so anyone who contacts Stephanie will be able to just join and observe. And we'll both close on the 12th of October, and that will close this session of hearings for the examination. So thank you very much, everybody, and that's all for today for this session.